Okay, well, so this is a little project that this is actually a version that's a couple of a couple of iterations old, but I was kind of racking my brain to think about what to do today. Yeah, it looks like I just broke something. That's okay. Breaking things is fun. So this is a screen porch around a swimming pool, which I have to say I've never done one of those before. I'm probably not going to get into this swimming pool today, but there's some things about this particular screen porch that I thought were interesting in terms of, I mean, not necessarily architecturally interesting. What I mean is that kind of a nice use of some Vectorworks tools. So this is kind of the inspiration for today's topic. And as I was saying a few minutes ago, I like to come up with topics for us to discuss that aren't just about one specific tool, though that's fine, but where we get to look at using multiple tools together and how they might work together for a real project. So can you guys see this other screen with the white rectangle that I've just highlighted?
Yes.
We see that.
Yeah, okay, cool. Okay, so I'm just going to be kind of recreating this live. And of course, I've got some things that are prepared, namely some wall styles and handrail styles and things like that, which, you know, that's fine. So the first thing I started doing is just used a couple of rectangles to lay out this screen porch. The larger rectangle is the area that's going to be enclosed and screened, and then the smaller rectangle is maybe like a south-facing sun deck that wouldn't be enclosed for people who want to lay out and catch some rays or whatever. And so while I'm thinking of those as two separate spaces, I'm just going to trace them together because they're really going to be one continuous floor, right? So oftentimes I will use surfaces, whether it's rectangles or polygons or whatever, as the basis for even parametric geometry. So for example, if we look at the slab tool, for example, there is a slab tool, and there's some nice things about the slab tool. One of them is that you can pick some walls and pick sort of a continuous enclosed path or walls, and then have the slab sort of fill those walls. And the nice thing about that is that as the walls move, the slab will readjust to fit the walls, which is great. I'm going to use a much more sort of primitive tool here, which is I'm just going to do a floor, which is an older tool and than slabs. And there are a lot, as I said, there are a lot of great things to be said for slabs, but on a simple project like this, I just have the wood decking itself, and that's that. There aren't multiple components. I'm not going to model any kind of slope on it. I'm not going to subtract anything from it in 3D. So a floor is just fine. So I'd like to draw a rectangle, and the reason I like rectangles is here. I'll just kind of minimize the zoom window that you can't see. And I like a rectangle because, of course, I can control its dimensions directly from the object info palette. That's nice, and I can get area takeoffs and perimeters, and very, very useful. So from the AEC menu, I'm going to just create a floor, and I'll just go ahead and make that -1.5 inches, and I'll make it 1.5 inches thick. So that's how floors work. You always have to start from the bottom of the floor and work your way up. And I use floors for all kinds of things, countertops, even in some cases like handrail ledges, or all sorts of things, not just floors. In this case, it's actually a floor. So I'm going to assign it to I have a class for this, floor deck. And if we look at that class, here it is. You can see that I've given it a hatch. I've got a hatch pattern that shows deck boards. I've assigned some textures to it. Could even give it some descriptions, and there aren't any save views or anything yet, so visibilities doesn't really matter. But like the vast majority of my classes, everything is used at creation, because that's one of the powerful things about classes is you can globally control the graphic attributes of the objects. So there you go. I'm going to go ahead and send that to back, and I will change these two rectangles to no fill. So, you know, that floor is going to look something like this. There it is. I've got this sort of Ipe pattern. The size of the boards is probably a little out of scale, but that's okay. And the boards are just nominally 4 inches apart. So I'm imagining it's like 3.5, you know, 1x4s or 2x4s at 4 inches on center, whatever. So that's it for the floor. One thing I want to mention is later we're going to subtract a stair from, we're going to cut out a stair. So I'll just go ahead and sketch that in for now. A couple of nice things about floors and slabs is that I can draw some geometry. So I've got two objects selected here, the floor and this rectangle, and I can clip surface, right? And so now it's clipped out that geometry. And then one little technique that I like to use is use a line as a measurement tool, because I have a keyboard shortcut for lines, so that's easier than just hunting for the tape measure tool. So one of the nice things about floors now is if I activate the reshape tool, I can just reshape that floor directly at the top level of the model. Previous versions of Vectorworks, you had to actually go in and edit the floor. So you'd have to do a command left bracket. I'm going to pause for a second because I'm probably flying through some keyboard shortcuts here, and it might be helpful if I turn those on, and I'm trying to remember where I hid that little tool.
Francois, at some point, will you show how, for example, if you know you're going to be building the deck out of those wood boards, and you want to make sure that you don't have a half a board at the front, at the bottom or top edge, you want to align your boards with the rectangle. I can't remember how to do that. I don't do it. But I know there's a way to align like brick patterns and tile patterns and all that sort of stuff. And
oh yeah. You mean like actually aligning the hatch? Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, that's pretty simple.
In this case, in particular, it would be kind of important. If you care.
Yeah. Or I could just tell the deck guy, you know, space them evenly.
But what's nice also is that it gives you a module to work with if you're doing things like cutting that stair. Yeah. Oh, I just need to cut 5 boards, and that's right. What your rectangle too.
Yep.
Francois, I want to interrupt for a minute. Your screen is flashing like crazy on my screen. I want to know if that's happening to anyone else.
Not me.
No. Huh. Francois, you guys are fine. Only the screen share is flashing. Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, so Bill, you wanted to know about mapping this. So like right now, I've got this fragment of a board, right? So that would just be, that's the attribute mapping tool. And I'm in a custom workspace, of course.
Your menu bar isn't showing up on my screen, the top menu bar. Your hours.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I don't know how to change
okay.
that.
Just speak when you're going to a menu, which item you're going to, and then we'll know.
Yeah, this is a tool, not a menu. It's the attribute mapping tool. By default, it's option A.
Okay.
I sent a quick screenshot in the chat.
And then you can just grab it down to here, you know, and snap to this edge. And, you know, if you want to get all 70s, you could like rotate it 45 degrees.
Right.
Yeah, rocking. Okay. Okay, so that's kind of a nice new thing that I don't have to edit the floor anymore. I can just go right to my reshape tool and just kind of move things around. Okay, so there's my floor. That was pretty easy. Again, I could have done this with a slab style. For example, if I wanted to have a 2-component floor structure where perhaps I had, you know, 7 1/4 inches, like some 2x8s that were going to be, you know, that I would see just as post shade and section, then I might make a slab style that was that included that wood structure and then the floor. But I'm not going to get that detailed here. One downside to floors is there isn't a quick way to convert a floor to a slab. So if you start out with a floor and you decide that you want to go to a slab later, what you need to do then is like double click on the floor, grab the polygon or shape or surface or whatever is making that floor, copy it, paste it in place, and then from your AEC menu, create objects from shapes and convert it, you know, create a slab from that. So anyway,
It's very useful putting a finished floor on top of a slab if you do it the other way around.
Yeah.
Yeah. 1.5 inch quarry tile or something. You know, you take that your floor and then put that on top of your slab, or put the slab underneath it, whichever one comes first.
Well, or you could just include quarry tile in your slab definition. Again, slabs are great when you have multiple components. Here, I just have one component, so I'm not bothering. And later, if I really was concerned about what the structure looked like, and I didn't just kick it over to the engineer, but I really wanted to lay it out, maybe that was going to be visible or something, and I was concerned about that, then I would probably just do it all with framing members and not just make an abstract sort of 2x8 kind of continuous slab. So at this point, I'm going to, I've got this rectangle here that I've kept as a kind of a guide, and I'm going to create some walls from that, namely the walls of the screen porch. And so what I'll do is I'll go ahead and draw the wall. So I'll just activate the wall tool. And I've got some wall styles already. You can see I've got this screen porch, and we'll look at that wall style in a lot of detail, but I'm going to select that style. And I have a couple of options. I could draw the wall from the outside or the center line or the inside or some offset, right? The wall is fairly, I'm sure most of you are very familiar with them. And I can draw the wall either from the overall wall or from the structural component if I've got a structural component identified. And I could draw it as a polygon, or I could draw it as a rectangle. The thing to keep in mind is that if I'm drawing it, whether as a polygon or a rectangle, I'm drawing it manually, then the wall is always going to, Vectorworks is always going to draw the wall counterclockwise. So if I snap this way here and draw it as a rectangle, it'll take a minute for that to do its thing. I draw it as a rectangle. I'm drawing it from the left side, which by convention is the outside of the wall. And so then the rectangle is within, those four walls are within the boundary of that rectangle. All right, if I just delete that. If I were to say draw it from the center line, then obviously they're going to be centered on that guiding rectangle. Okay. So generally speaking, you're going to want to draw walls from the left side. And, you know, boop, there we go. So what does that look like? Well, it looks something like this, right? So that's kind of cool. You can see that I've got these 3-inch posts, steel or aluminum, not quite sure yet at this stage. And they're all completely open, right? So, so one way that I've done screen porches in the past when they're wood or steel for that matter is use the curtain wall tool and use the frame of the curtain wall tool to represent the structure, and then use the panels of the curtain wall tool, what in an actual curtain wall you would, you know, would be glass or perhaps a spandrel panel, for the aluminum insect screening. In this case, I've created a curtain wall that's completely open, and there's a good reason for that, which I'll get to. So let's kind of delve into the nuts and bolts of that curtain wall. And it looks like there's a chat. I'm going to look at that. Oh, yeah, that's Jacob sent a screenshot. Okay, thank you to everybody. So I don't need to worry about that. Thanks, Jacob. Okay, so let's look at that style so I can find it in my resource manager. Let's look at all my resources. Right, there it is. Or if you don't want to hunt for it in the resource manager, you could right click on it, and there is locate wall style in resource manager as one of your default contextual menu options. Or you can just click on it, and in the object info palette, it shows up here, and I'm not going to unstyle it. I'm just going to directly edit the style. I'm not actually that interested in editing the style. I'm just using the edit wall style dialog box to kind of show you this wall. So again, with a curtain wall, unlike a standard wall, there are two major components. There's the frame settings, and there's the panel settings. So I've given this a standard wall thickness of 3 inches. I chose 3 inches because that's a standard square post that I can get that I see on the Viking Fence website. So the idea is this is a very lightweight structure, and I'm going to dare my engineer to repurpose some Viking Fence posts for the structure of this screen porch because it's so large. That might be a terrible idea. We'll see. I've given it a name, obviously, and then I've got horizontal grid lines, a horizontal at 3 feet, and then one again at 9 feet. Now I don't really, this wall isn't going to be 9 feet, 12 feet tall, right? So I just made that second spacing dimension here, 9 feet, just so tall that 3 feet doesn't repeat, right? If I were to make this, say, 24 inches, then it would repeat 3 feet, 2 feet, 3 feet, 2 feet, and so on and so forth. But I'm just making it so tall so that I just get the one horizontal, and that's it. And then, of course, the horizontal at the top. And then vertically, I'm spacing this about 6 feet. And that is just an initial sort of spacing, and we're going to play with that in a bit. So let's start by looking at the frame settings. So in a curtain wall, I've got vertical frames, right? What the intermediate sort of posts, if you will. I've got horizontal frames. The start boundary frame, that is the one at the end of the wall, the vertical frame. The end boundary frame, the one at the other end of the wall. The top boundary frame, what we might think of as a header, and the bottom boundary frame, what we would think of as a sole plate, right? So those are all of the frame options, and I can make them all the same or different. In this case, I've made the vertical and horizontal frames the same. they're of a type these are all the different types that I have, and I've made these all butt glazed. And they're pretty much the same. The only difference is note that the vertical frames I'm giving a fairly heavy line weight, and the horizontal frames I'm giving a lighter line weight. And but they're both 3x3. And the start boundary, I'm using this option called break metal, because what I want, let me cancel out of this and cancel out of this. What I want is I want these corner posts to read as posts at the corners. Can everybody see that? How if I select these two walls, you're kind of getting the highlight, and I can use my X-ray mode. So what's really happening is that the curtain wall is giving me these two half posts at the corner. And that way I get the appearance of a 3-inch post at the end. So the way I achieve that, again, is by choosing this start and end boundary frame as break metal. And the width here is the width at the inside corner. Well, it won't let me make it 0. So I'm just going to make it really tiny. I could try 1/1000th of an inch, a mil, but I'm not sure at what point it will stop cooperating. So I just made it 1/100th of an inch, 10 mils. You know, that is well below the tolerances of any kind of dimensional accuracy that I'm going to be concerned with in building a screen porch. For the top boundary frame, again, it's like the vertical and horizontals, 3 inches by 3 inches. It's in the material steel galvanized class, so it renders properly like all the other posts. Only in this case, I'm giving it a dashed line style, so that if we're seeing it, it looks dashed above, right?
First of all, how come the
and then for the bottom,
how come the diagram doesn't alter the dimensions on it when you have like used wall thickness? So it always showed dimensions.
Because it doesn't.
It just
Because
doesn't.
it doesn't.
Just sort of like an example.
It's just a static graphic. All the little preview diagrams on parametric objects in Vectorworks, whether it's windowsills or whatever, they're basically, you know, JPEGs or bitmaps or whatever. They're not previews. For the bottom boundary frame, I'm imagining that I'm going to have some sort of, eventually I'm going to have some sort of connection detail that my engineer is going to help with, right? So I'm not going to see anything here, but Vectorworks still wants me to have one. So what I've done there with the frame for the bottom boundary frame is I've made it teeny tiny, and I've given it a virtual post. So that's one of the things I can do with the curtain wall tool, is have virtual frame members when Vectorworks needs an edge to bound to, but it's not actually going to model it. The other thing I could do is just model it, but put it in something like some class that I never turn on, like my non-plot class or whatever. But virtual is a good way to go. And then, of course, now in 2021, I could go ahead and use a frame material. So instead of like having a material steel stainless class, I could just have a generic structural post class, right? And then use the frame material option to give it the appropriate graphic attributes and rendering styles and so forth. But I didn't do that in this case. So that's how I've set up all the posts. Just very, very dumb 3-inch by 3-inch posts. Then for the panel settings, it's even dumber. I've just made them all open. So I could make them spandrels. I could make them spandrels with a face. I could make them glazed. This is how I usually do screen porches, and I put it in the glazing screen class. This is a class that I created for insect screening that has a translucent RenderWorks texture to it, right? But in this case, I'm making this open, and there's a reason for that that I will explain in a bit. So there are panels, but they're open, right? That's that. So that's very straightforward. So there we go. That is how I created this curtain wall style. And you can see that that Vectorworks has very nicely laid them out just like I told it to at 6-foot centers. And that is really nice if my wall happens to fall on a 6-foot module, but it doesn't. So I'm going to need to distribute these posts so that they're evenly distributed, because there's no way I'm going to make somebody build this way. So the way I do that with a curtain wall is I'll just here, let me zoom in on this one here. Since it's a shorter wall, we can zoom in a little more closely. So I can just double click on the wall, and then when I do that with a curtain wall tool, I can either get a reshape tool option, which is just like the reshape tool that you would have with a normal wall, or I would get the edit curtain wall tool, and that's what I want. So with the edit curtain wall tool, I can either edit frame members or panels. I can add frame members, I can split them, I can join them, or I can move them around. Or I can even edit the settings, which is the same thing as what we've just done by just clicking on it in the object info palette. In this case, most of what I end up doing with the curtain wall tool is editing the frames themselves. So when I do that, I can click on this post, and then what you can't see is that I'm holding down the shift key and I'm clicking on this post, and I'm clicking on that one, and I'm clicking on this one, and I'm clicking on that end post. And then if I right click on while I'm hovering over one of these posts, I get this little contextual menu for the curtain wall. And you can guess what I'm going to do. I'm not going to delete the frames, I'm going to distribute them. So there we go. Vectorworks has redistributed those frames evenly. And now those are all an even number. And I could decide, well, that's pretty good, or maybe I just want, you know, maybe that's too many. Maybe I want to go big. So I'll just click on one of these and delete it, and then click on this and this and this and this, and again, right click and distribute them. Which is not what I want to do. I want to go ahead and keep the 4 bays. So having done that, let's do it again over here. That is such a tiny little bay that I know already that I'm going to want to distribute that. Boom, 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 boom. Right click, distribute. It's a lot of fun. One of the reasons that I really love, you know, computers in general, but Vectorworks in particular, is because I'm a pretty lazy man, and I like how it's easy to do things. So I'm not even going to bother with these 2 walls. I'm just going to delete them, because pretty soon when I'm done with these 2 walls, I'm just going to mirror them, right? So I'm going to get back to curtain walls. In fact, we're going to continue to talk about them, but let me just kind of pause here for a second and give anyone an opportunity to ask questions about curtain walls so far. If there's anything that isn't clear, and I can't see you, so I can't look at and see the. There we go. Okay, now I can see.
I appreciate you sharing that distribute feature. I wasn't aware that was in the curtain walls. I use it for so many other objects, but you know, distribute horizontally, vertically, etc. So it's curious to see that.
Yeah. It's I use under modify. I use align distribute all day long, right? But yeah, and that may also work. I don't know. But yeah, the distribute tool is great. Distribute feature of curtain walls is great. So now I'm going to show you another cool little feature, which I kind of knew about, but never really thought about and never really used. And then it dawned on me that this would be a really great feature for this particular application. So you may have noticed, let me go ahead and insert a window here. And I've got a ready-made window style called aluminum screen. I'll just pop that in there and let's zoom in and look at it. So this is just essentially a model of one of those aluminum screens that you just would clip on outside of a window. I've noticed some places you can get these to be quite large, right? And if we edit the style, it is a styled window. And it's a window, right? So it's always going to be fixed glass. If it's got the little alias arrow, that means that's sort of baked into the style and it's not editable. It's got a plan wall offset that I sort of worked out. And notice that it's got this little feature called a curtain wall window. And you may have seen that before and wondered, what is that good for? You're going to find out in a couple of minutes. It's got, 2D, 3D visualization and all that stuff, ID tags, blah, 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 jam and sash. So I went online and, they're 1 inch by roughly half an inch, but I, got really picky about the dimensions. That's the manufacturer's dimension for the actual sash. And the glazing, of course, is in this case under glazing. It's in my glazing screen class, right? So let me, there's an area of the screen. So I'll hit OK. And just to go to the glazing screen class, so I've given it kind of a bronzy color, but I could give it kind of a charcoal color, depending on what your preferences are. And under textures, I've created this Vectorworks texture that's just translucent. And in the resource manager, what that looks like. There it is. We'll edit that. And so it takes on whatever color of the object attribute. So in other words, if I want to change the color of the screening, I just need to change the class and the texture will respond accordingly. It's non-reflective. It just has plain transparency. And I gave it like a, I don't know, I think this texture is so old that you still set the transparency with sliders, and that's why it ended up being this weird 18.5, right? So that's the texture that goes to the class that is baked into the window. And so now that I have this lovely window, all I need to do is I'll just drag it over here, and I'm just going to option drag so it'll keep an instance of it out here in the drawing. So that's something to know about, option drag if you don't. And you see that I dragged it to the window, to the opening in the curtain wall, and it resized itself. This one is 5'10" roughly by 6'7.5". This one is 5'7" by 6'5.5". So it resized itself to fit the opening. That's what that little designation curtain wall window means. It means that when I drag the window to a curtain wall or insert it in the curtain wall, it will reshape itself. Now, sometimes it's a little picky about which opening it wants to go to. And you can get multiple instances in the same.
That's brilliant. Really cool trick there.
So yeah, so I got that, and then I'll just drag it and duplicate it. And, you know, I guess if this weren't so much fun, you might think this was tedious, but I'm just having a good time here, just dragging and just popping these guys in, right?
How dare you have fun at work?
Yeah, I know. So, hey, what happens, you may wonder, what happens if I take my posts I'll just ignore one of these. And reshape them or redistribute them. Look at that. Those windows also resize themselves to fit the spacing. So the idea here is that I just have these posts and then I buy these aluminum frames, and they're a little bit larger than the openings, and you just have a self-tapping screw periodically that you just face mount these screens to the post, and I don't know, maybe you have either a very, very cheap or a very, very expensive screen porch. We're going to find out. So I'll admit, if you zoom in real close, you can see where this isn't like totally, faithful to the design intent, in that I can't, because these are curtain wall windows, they reshape themselves to the opening, so I can't have them overlap the post. There may be some clever way to circumvent that. I'm not sure. But I haven't figured it out. And then the other thing to know about these guys is that when I get to the end, post, do you see how it has kind of messed up my little post here? If I delete that window, well, let me just undo this. Probably a better instance is if I go here to this corner. So I'm just going to drag this to this one. I'm holding down the Option key so that it's duplicating as I drag it. Let me go also turn off the floor, make it a little bit easier to see what's going on. So I'm holding down the Option key and dragging, and then holding down the Option key and dragging. There we go. So if I, let me get in over here and fly around to the inside, you can see how it has actually made itself wider. Can you guys see that in this view, how that last window has made itself a little bit wider than I want it to be? It sort of comes to the midpoint of that post instead of to the inside edge. So it has deformed the last post and made it no longer rectangular. It's done this to it. Can everybody see that?
Yes, it was almost perfect. Almost.
Yeah, almost perfect. That's okay. That's okay. So it turns out that that is a function of the curtain wall window. It's not. It does not exhibit this behavior with just a conventional window. So I'm just going to take these last two, and I'm just going to convert them to unstyled, and then no longer make them curtain wall windows. So I insert them first, and then no longer make them curtain wall windows. So they reshape themselves to fit the opening that's available. They're spaced appropriately for the posts, except that they're just a wee bit too wide. And I think it's been a while. I think it's off by 1.5 inches. So I'll just subtract 1.5 inches from their width. Okay, and then I'll just move them in the wall 3/4 of an inch. or maybe even, no, yep, that does it. So now, by unstyling them and making them no longer curtain wall windows, then they work. And notice that they look and behave just like all the other insect screen panels. The only difference is that they, you know, if I were to redistribute those posts, they wouldn't automatically resize themselves to fit that opening. I'm just looking at the clock, and we're about halfway through, and there's a fair amount more modeling to do. So I'm gonna move on to a couple of other things, and then we can come back to it if we need to. The next thing I want to do is give myself a couple of things. Let's make that maybe make the floor gray. There we go. So out on this sun deck, I'm going to need some kind of guardrail because I'm going to be, you know, out of grade. So let me go back to top plan view. And I'll just go ahead and mirror this wall. And mirror this wall, even though they're not really done, but that's okay. Okay, so I'm going to need some sort of rail around here. And so we have the handrail, the railing fence tool. This was introduced 2 or 3 versions ago, or reintroduced. You'll find it under the furniture and fixtures menu, which looks like this, and it's the railing fence tool. It's got a couple of modes. You can draw it as a polygon, which is useful for drawing them in plan when everything is level. But then you can also draw it in, sort of isometrically, which is useful if you wanted to sort of follow a stair or a ramp or whatever. So in this case, let's just look at the settings, right? And in some ways, it's kind of like a curtain wall, kind of. You've got a top post that you can specify. You've got, or top rail, excuse me. You've got a post. I'm giving it a height of 210.5. You've got frames and panels. In this case, I'm just creating a round shape, and it's a 1/4 inch in diameter. That's probably a little oversized, but yeah, I mean, I could make it an 1/8 or, you know, whatever. And they're going to start at the top and the bottom, and you can see that they're spaced 4 inches vertically and horizontally, right? So in other words, I've got this same sort of 3-inch post and beam kind of profile that's inset with hog panel. And I can assign classes to all of these different components, and I can miter the ends if I need to. And once I set it all up, I can save it as a symbol, and then I can go ahead and you know, once it's saved as a symbol, I can then use it on other projects. So that's the setting that I have. So I'll just go ahead and start drawing that, you know, here, 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 and here. Okay. And you can see how it's gone ahead and made that for me. And I've given it, even though it's a different tool, I've worked it out so that it's the same height. Obviously, I drew from the center line, so I'm going to need to adjust all this. right? So that's off by 1.5 inches, half a post. And that's off by 1.5 inches, half a post. And this is off by 1.5 inches, but just in the Y direction. And I'll put it in my handrail class so that it appears correct graphically. Right, and I can send that to back and whatnot. So that's how I made the handrail at these this little sun deck. But then inside the screen porch, I also need some hog panel. Because if I'm far out of grade, I don't want little kids falling through these insect screens or animals destroying them. And so I've got another railing fence here that's basically very similar to this one. It just doesn't have the posts. And so that's how I made this, right? Again, if I look at the settings, for post, I just basically made the post because you have to have a post. You can't not have a post. So I just made the post one of the wires of the hog panel. So it's really indistinguishable from the frame horizontal and vertical members. And then likewise, I sort of wrapped around the perimeter here in order to sort of make that work nicely. Now, another option that I may have is to do this with a texture. I could create a Vectorworks texture or a RenderWorks texture that was essentially just a grid like this that had, you know, the openings were just transparent. And then I would also need to associate a hatch with that texture so that if I were to do, say, a hidden line view, I would get to see it. The reason not to do a texture in this case is seem to be, there we go. The reason not to do a texture is that if I were to draw a section through this, it wouldn't appear properly, but a texture would render a lot faster. So if I had a whole lot of this hog panel, like in a large project, I might, instead of actually physically modeling each wire of the hog panel, I might just use a texture to sort of simulate that, if that makes sense.
Francois, could you do both at this, and then just turn one off for rendering and another one, and then turn the other one on for doing sections?
Yeah, that's a lot of trouble, I guess. Or I could just, you know, draw a bunch of circles and, or just draw a dashed line in my section and point to it and
That's
say
true.
hog panel.
Yeah.
And Francois,
So,
I'm assuming
yeah.
I'm assuming you can make these this hog wire diamond shaped if you wanted to. That there's all that flexibility associated with this tool. Diagonals is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, if you can, for the frame, you can rotate them by 45 degrees. But, so if you wanted to have something that looked more like, you know, chain link fence or something like that, hurricane fencing, or tornado fence rather. But but you can't, like if you wanted to do like a 60 or a 30, that kind of diamond pattern, no. 45 is what you can do. If you wanted to do something fancier than 45, then you would want to use something called a surface array in order to simulate that. And then you'd have a tremendous amount of design control over it. But surface arrays are computationally a little bit heavier duty. They might be a little boggy to render if you had a very complex or large model with large extents.
It seems like the default would just be to go back to a texture in that circumstance, because then you're unlimited.
Yeah, it's, you know, I was really, pardon the pun, I was really on the fence on this one, whether to do this with a texture or whether to do it as modeling it. And in fact, in a later iteration of this design, we ended up replacing a stucco underpinning with just landscape wire, thinking that would be less expensive, and then we could just plant something on it. And so that ended up being just a wall style where there was a component that was essentially a landscape wire hatch, or texture rather, in other words, like a 2-inch wide by 4-inch tall grid instead of a 4x4. And then there was a 2D hatch associated with it so that it appears correctly in hidden line views like you would expect for CDs. So, you know, there are times to do it and times not to. And sometimes, you know, it's kind of, you just kind of take a best guess and then maybe you decide you guessed wrong and you need to go back and do it again. So then the next thing I want to touch on is the roof. And again, the theme of this particular project is, you know, lightweight and cleverly inexpensive, which is a really dangerous thing to shoot for. So this is a corrugated profile for a product called Steelmaster, which some of you may be familiar with. I've actually modeled it or drawn it fairly accurately in profile, so it actually has some thickness to it as opposed to being just a single line. It's a double line. And these are prefabricated corrugated panels. Each panel is one rib, and you can either have it straight or you can curve it, and there's sort of a minimum radius below which you can't really go. There's lots of great examples of it. There's some around town. This is what was used for the big porte-cochere roof at the Mueller HEB that Lake Flato did. It's also been used, you know, in all sorts of applications, some awnings and sort of site utility enclosures, like little mini Quonset huts. Steelmaster is the product if you're not familiar with it. And the thing that sort of suggested this to me is that because of the very deep corrugations and the fact that it's galvanized, it is both structure and substructure, and you know, it is the decking, it is the structure, and it is the roofing itself. And so I thought, well, okay, well, let's try that. So I just drew one module according to the manufacturer's cut sheet and then just arrayed it and then added it all together. And then, so to make this this roof, we're just going to bow this puppy. So I'm just going to go into a front view here and borrowing some of Al's terminology, sort of have more kind of a draftsman-like approach to this. So you can see that the out-to-out dimension of my post here is 20 feet, right? And so, so I'm just going to draw an arc by 3 points and just kind of eyeball something that looks good to me, like that. There we go. That looks nice. And as I look at that and I inspect it in the object info palette, I can see that it has a radius of 24 feet, 7 inches and some change. I don't like the irrationality of that dimension. So now I'm just going to redraw the arc here and click on the 2 points of the chord and just specify 24 feet. And to my eye, that looks just like the one that I drew before.
Why didn't you
So,
change that to 24 feet in the object info palette of the first arc?
well, I'm going to let you work that out for yourself, because basically it wouldn't give me the same. It wouldn't end up at the same. I can change the radius, but then I wouldn't have the same.
Oh, I
I
got
can
it.
change
Yeah,
the
yeah,
chord,
yeah,
but I wouldn't have the same.
yeah. Endpoints.
I can change the arc, but I wouldn't have the same subtended chord.
Right.
And I care about both.
Yep,
And
yep.
incidentally, I do care about both, because when Steelmaster gives me a price, they're going to want to know the arc lengths and they're going to want to know the chord length.
Right.
So it's really nice to have that information. Okay, so I've established that I need a 24-foot radius to get a pleasing shape. And what I might do is say, well, you know, how about if I just, how about if I just give myself like a little 2-foot overhang. Again, I'm just basically drafting here, and do that again. Right. And then I can just, you know, join this arc to that 2-foot overhang. And so now I can look at that arc and I can manually inspect and see that the start angle is almost 60 degrees and the sweep angle is almost 60 degrees. So I'll just jot these down. 59.9 degrees is my start and my sweep is 60.2 degrees. Okay, cool. So I'm done with the drafting part. So I'm just going to go back here to top plan view and go back to my corrugation here. And I'm going to grab this little 2D locus. Oh, it's in a group. Sorry. I'm going to grab this 2D locus and just pick an inside face. Say right here, whatever. Okay. And move it to the left 24 feet. And then I will select the profile and the locus, and let me exit the group and ungroup this because it may not play nice in a group. And I will go ahead and under model, I will sweep that and I will give it some sweep increment of, I don't know, say 3 degrees. And you can see that I have a start and an arc angle. So I'll start at the 59.9 and I'll give it a sweep of 60.2. And so now it's made the geometry just the way I want it, only not where I want it. All right, that's cool. So I'll go back to my front view and just rotate left. And I'll just move it into place.
Have the overhang. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I was at the wrong place. So, you know, here's where I was probably too hasty and I shouldn't have deleted all that geometry. So I gotta do it again. Goodness. From here to here, 24 feet.
Probably just snap to the midpoint now that you have both objects, right?
Yeah. Sure. Fine. Ta-da. And then in plan,
Now what?
I'll just, oh, that's probably not going to go well.
No.
We'll see. Ah, that worked. Great. I was careful to sort of lay this out, or at least I tried to be, so that the valley of the corrugation ended up on a post right there. Pretty close. Maybe move it down an inch. Yeah, there we go. There we go.
Wow.
Very, very smooth. And then a couple of things that well, still lots more to do, but one of the components is what do I do in here? And this is why I wanted, you know, the Steelmaster profile, as you can see, has a kind of a narrow flat part at the ridge, but at the valley, it's nice and wide. So that's a good place to have a window. So here's another window that started out as the same style as that insect screening, only I unstyled it and gave it a segmented top and just sort of fiddled with the settings. Okay. So I want to be sure not to insert that in the wall. So this is slightly different from what I had before. So that width is going to be about 4 feet narrower than my original project. Right. And it'll have slightly, sorry, taller rise. No, it doesn't like that. No, because my rise cannot exceed my height. And it's being set at a sill of window or head of window, so I'll just make it the sill.
Is there any way to get the curtain wall to conform to the underside of a curved roof?
I could, but in this case, that's not actually what I want in reality. Like, I don't want these clunky 3-inch posts. Moreover, what do I need structure there for? The Steelmaster panel is already carrying the load. But yes, I could segment it as the curtain wall as a series of straight line segments. In fact, I could have it fit to the geometry, and it would find that roof and it would fit to it. But that's not what I want. What I want is just some flimsy little insect screen to like keep the bugs out, and that's it, no more. Anyway, so I'll play with the height here. You know, I could just measure it. That, you know, it's probably 26 inches. That's great. And then give it a rise of 26 inches, you know, or maybe 24. Anyway, you get the idea. I'll just play with it till it's close. And then I just gave it some muntins that are the same dimension as the sash. So I've got these little stiffening pieces that are equally divided. And, you know, I'm pretty close to being off to the races here. I also have a really flimsy little screen door that I created, and that too is well, this is not a curtain wall door. I don't need it to be a curtain wall door because remember, I just made these panels. I'm going to turn my roof off here. What? There we go. Yeah, so this wants to be a little barn door, and I didn't make it a barn door. I didn't make it a curtain wall door because you can't do curtain wall barn doors. Vectorworks doesn't know what to do with that. So, so in this case, I'm just going to have to, measure the opening size, 4'7.5", and make that the same. And then just manually place it, right? Or however it goes. And so, again, because I've got this, yeah, it's also on the wrong layer. Oh, everything's in the same design layer. Well, that explains it. Let's give it a Z of 0. That's better. Now, of course, I've got this post that's in the way of my door. So this is where it's really useful to be able to selectively just take one of these with the curtain wall edit tool and just pop out a frame. And there you go. So I can have that door sort of in the wall without actually, having it inserted. So, there's a couple of other things to consider. Let's go back and look at the stair. You can see that if I look at my stair settings, I just created a handrail as part of the stair that very closely mimics the appearance of the perimeter little rail here. So if we just looked at the railings, right? So I've got, for the guardrail, it's got a height of 3 feet. They're rectangular 3" by 3". The frame is 1/4 inch round, and spaced no more than 4 inches apart, vertically and horizontally. And the posts can be approximately 3 feet apart, but then they're placed individually. In other words, they'll be placed on a tread regardless of where my stair slope ends up being, my risers and treads. And then the handrail is just on the other side. And so post guardrail on one side, handrail on the other, and then just kind of fiddling with the structure of it, making it a 3-stringer stair and so on and so forth. And then lastly, I'll just switch over here to the final version. Lastly, I've got this wall that's an underpinning. Let me brighten things up a little bit. There we go. So you can see that. So I just have some different wall styles for the underpinning, kind of following the stair. Pretty straightforward stuff. And some furniture. And this roof needs to move up. Not exactly sure by how much, but definitely needs to move up. So that's, I think I've covered just most of it here. Again, just sort of playing with where do I want to use a curtain wall? Where do I want to use the handrail fence tool, and just kind of fiddling with the settings till it does what you want it to do.
All right. Cool.
So there was a question quite a while ago. Sorry for not catching that earlier. Why not, Harlan, you said, why not use panel for screen panes, or what does panel do? Do you mean in the curtain wall tool itself?
Yes, in the curtain wall tool. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. And that's typically what I do, but here I wanted to be able to show that there would be these little aluminum frames.
Yeah.
And so I built them as window objects, but I've done lots of screen porches or model lots of screen porches that don't have this. There's just, you know, there's just a post and then some screening there. And that looks fine for most cases, right? But screen porches, there tends to be a stop and there's just a little bit more kind of granularity to the model. And so I was trying to do something that was a little bit more faithful to real life, even though it doesn't overlap the post the way I'd like it to.
Thank you. I get it. Could you just briefly say, when you make that window, a custom window, do you start with a window tool or did you start from scratch?
Yeah. I just threw in a kind of a bare bones little window and then just went through all the settings and changed the various characteristics, the sash dimensions and the classes and all of that to what I wanted it to be. And then afterwards, I saved it as a style. And then when I did that, when you save a window as a style, what happens is absolutely every parameter of that window ends up being style defined. So then you need to go back to that window and deselect which options you want the user to be able to affect individually.
And you did the same for the arched window above the curtain wall?
What I did there is, hang on just one second. Okay, sorry. The little window up here, what I did is once I had one of these windows that was pretty close to what I wanted. And so I could just take one of those and convert it to unstyled, and then it had the classes and the textures and the sash dimensions that I liked, and I just had to make it into a segmented unit and put it in place.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Francois, I wonder if I could ask about the stair rail.
Mm-hmm.
And can you show that on your screen, please?
It's the same question I had.
There we go. We find ourselves needing to satisfy the terms of TOS with stair rails, and that requires on the downhill side a certain flat portion. And
Sure, on a commercial stair. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm wondering, is that an option with? Say again.
It's built in. That's built into the tool. Yep.
So I can do that. Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah. You can just for the top rail, you can start and end at the tread, or you can extend it by the required 12 inches, either horizontally or sloping, which is different, right, at the top and the bottom.
Correct.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Because that's not TOS, that's ADA, and.
Yeah. Good. Okay.
Yep.
And then if you wanted to merge the stair rail with your guardrail, is it possible to remove the top rail on your stair rail and just accept the guardrail as that rail? You have two rails right next to one another.
Probably the other way around. I would eliminate the post on the guardrail and extend it to the stair rail, or I would use the 3D mode on the guardrail, just not have one on the stair, and then just move this and just draw it along that sort of three-dimensional path. The downside to that is the nice thing about the stair version of the rail is that it knows where the treads are. And so it will see how it's nicely positioned to post at every tread.
So one other question about the railing is for the, well, let's call it the wire mesh. And
Yes.
and you're having it showing parallel to the rail, but frequently it would simply be still a 90-degree square mesh that would be cut into panels. So is that something that would have to be done separately, I imagine?
No, I think that's an option, actually. So the frame bars, for some reason, I think, well, I could be wrong about that. I'm not sure about that, Bill.
Right.
I know I've seen it on a so that the panel follows the rail,
Yeah.
and maybe that was done with the handrail with the fence / railing tool rather than the Vectorworks guardrail.
That makes sense.
Let me look at the frame here. Ba, ba, ba. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Great.
Offhand, I don't recall whether that can be tinkered with.
Right.
Other questions?
Yeah, Francois, on the railing fence tool, you said that you can save it as a symbol. Can that not be saved as a style?
Yeah, that tool predates styles as they're currently implemented by a generation or by an iteration. So I don't think, yeah, see, there's no styles here. What I can do is under settings, I can, under general, I can save it as a symbol, which is essentially saving it as a style.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then, you know, so like if I save it as a symbol and call it 3 by 3 hog, for example. Okay. Then I could take this one. Sorry. So there's that railing fence. Move it over here. Okay. And so under settings here, there we go. So I can sort of assign the symbol. It calls it a symbol, but it's essentially, it's a style.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Very cool.
Sure.
Wow. That's the way to do it. Railing fence.
Any other questions?
Yeah. That's a lot.
If there's any time, I'd love to explore the wall joining components, but I respect if y'all need to get back to work.
I have about 8 minutes. So yeah, do you want to share your screen?
I'd be happy to. Thank you for making time.
Oh, sure. My pleasure.
So I'm gonna go ahead and share the whole desktop. So ignore the mess for a minute. All right, so this is the circumstance I'm dealing with, and it just kind of popped up in the last 24 to 48 hours. I was just made aware. We've got walls. Let me get into the design layer here. If I'm looking at the way my walls are joining, we're looking at a modular construction here. So not as typical as y'all might used to see in plans, but if I just want to join these walls going around the corner and then join these, I'm going to move that back and reattach to show you what's going on. If I go to a T-join here at that wall, I'm getting that framing member comes all the way in. So it's the component for some reason is going all the way through.
Yeah, so use your, first of all, how about if you start with, go to the remove wall breaks tool. It's about 8 down on your palette there. Yeah. And just
go ahead and
do a clean sweep everywhere. Yep.
Okay.
And then start with your corner join. Yep.
Sure.
And
see,
then
that runs that component all the way through.
Yeah. So the reason for that is click on one of those walls and edit the style. Right click on it and edit the style. Oh, you could just edit it right there. But that's okay. You're good. Go.
Oh, okay. So.
Yeah, so let's go to one of those components. Let's go to whichever, yeah, the sheathing.
Stud framing. Okay, so the sheathing.
So do you see, okay, so that's good. Okay, oh, I see what your problem is. Cancel that. Your problem is that stucco is listed as the structural, as the core. You need to make the wall stud framing the core.
Oh, yeah.
So that's, click, there's a checkbox where it says core next to function.
Yep.
So make the stud framing the core.
I have no idea why that changed, but it shouldn't be that way. Wow, thanks for the find. That's amazing. Okay, let's see if that, and make it look easy, Francois.
Yeah, don't replace heights.
Okay.
Well, it's you don't have to save, but no, it's fine.
Okay. All right. Let's
so then
see if this works. We'll remove that again.
And right click on the other wall too. Just right click on it, and then you can edit the up in the vertical wall, the one with the brown, not the interior wall. Yeah.
Right.
If you right click and scroll down, you can edit wall style right there. Yep.
Yeah.
Then you have
shorter direction.
Yep. So that one's good. So that's what's happening is it's trying to join your stucco to your framing. So let's see what happens when you join there.
Okay. Just cancel that because that was
cancel.
good.
Yep.
Option J. Boom.
And then
that probably does it. Let's see if these others obey. Oh, amazing. That saves me a call to support.
Yeah. And by the way, undo just one undo.
Okay.
The right-hand wall of that double interior wall, you can do a T-join with walls that are parallel, like collinear walls. So you could T-join that to the outside. No, to the wall that's below it, to the other vertical wall. Yeah. Try that.
Okay.
That also works. Sometimes you've got walls that, like for example, if you had a baseboard as part of the wall style,
you'd want that to continue.
If you tried to do a join with the horizontal exterior wall, it would tell you that the walls don't intersect because one sticks out further than the other.
Right.
And so that's where that sort of parallel, it's counterintuitive because you don't think of a T-join as being a parallel join.
Right.
But the T-join also works on collinear walls.
Nice.
And that can be useful sometimes.
Great. Thank you, Francois. Thanks everybody else for suffering through that.
Oh no, that was a great
good
tip. Absolutely worth it.
That core check mark, I wasn't looking for that. So I think I just inherited a wall style from someone else.
Or somebody was editing it and somehow clicked it and
accidentally.
Like, there's a million settings.
Yeah. That's great.
There's a million settings.
Thanks.
Well, thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it. I'm sorry I've got to run, and we'll see everybody again next month.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Francois.
Thank you, Francois. It was great.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.